Yeah, you know, it's your boy. Yeah. Alright, listen. I started out on the pavement. Bet you thought I wouldn't make it. Wondering why you ain't did it? Cause you only working that day shift. Yeah, success is contagious. We're winners on regular basis.
And welcome back to another episode of the P.O.T.N podcast, a podcast dedicated to all people, motivating all of you listeners to go that one step further in your lives. I'm your host, Takura, and today I am joined by a fantastic guest. She is an educator in her own right, on a mission to help people like me and you, all of you listening and watching, unlock their potential and really live impactful lives. She's worked with corporate managers, charities, refugee groups, and many other institutions, building on their teamwork, helping them improve their leadership and well-being. I'd like to introduce you all to Gemma. I'm so excited for her to come onto the podcast today and share everything about her business and her story. I'm really excited to have you, Gemma. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me and for that really warm welcome.
You're welcome indeed. Yeah, I try to make sure that we start off on a high note and make sure we finish on a high note as well. So
I think you might have captured my intro better than I would do.
No. Well, it's a learning curve. I guess that's the whole essence of it. Like, we're going to learn from each other today, and we're going to take bits and pieces from each other and apply that in what we work on going forward, whether it's podcasting or it's the courses you do or anything else really.
Wonderful, thank you.
Absolutely. So, we'll do a bit of an icebreaker, and to kick us off, can you tell our listeners, a bit about yourself, where you're from, what you're currently doing, and what you get up to in your free time?
So, my name is Gemma. I'm based in Sheffield in the UK, which is right in the middle of the country, as far away from the sea as you could possibly be. I started my kind of career and passion wanting to be a teacher. From being about 8 years old, that's what I was determined to be. And along the way, I accidentally got involved in youth work and participated in a leadership program when I was a teenager, which gave me so many personal development skills that I didn't even know were missing. But once I started to learn them, it really helped me to understand myself and to reach my goals. And so over time, that became a voluntary role that then grew into a real passion. And now I get the pleasure of doing the thing I've always loved as a hobby, as a business. And I've been working now for the last 7 years, delivering all sorts of soft skills training in what I call self-leadership, which is all about helping people to understand themselves better, live their lives effectively, reach their goals, manage their well-being, and all of the kind of things that actually you don't get to do in school. So I was a teacher for a year and a half, not very long, but realised actually the things that I'm teaching people in the formal classroom are not the things that I think are the most important. And so I took the plunge and gave up a very steady career to go down an entrepreneurial route. So that's what I'm doing now. And it's really nice and varied. I get to work with international audiences. I get to work with different age groups and see people grow and meet people like yourself and share ideas and best practice, which is what I love most about kind of the lifestyle I have and the things that I do. It's those moments of transformation.
Absolutely. Wow. And yes, that is a very solid intro as well. I think you've upped me there. You've gone one above me in terms of level there, in terms of delivery. And I like how obviously your story has shaped out, and how you obviously you started down the teaching route, and then you thought, hang on a second, I love impacting and working with people directly a lot more. And then obviously went down that route, the entrepreneurial route, which I know it has its ups and its downs, but with somebody
Sure.
of a character and mindset like you, I'm pretty sure it's one of those where you always power through, and I'm really happy to hear that. And for the listeners' benefit as well, and the people watching this on YouTube, can you please tell us where we can find your business, or if anyone is interested in getting in touch with you?
So my business is called the Self Leadership Initiative, which is a very long name. So the
Yeah.
website is the sli.co.uk. You can also find me on LinkedIn by searching for Gemma Perkins, or if you want to find me on Instagram at Self Leadership One. And even though it's a very long name, I really was passionate about calling it the Self Leadership Initiative, because initiative is about starting a movement,
Mhm.
taking action. And lots of people talk about leadership in the sense of management, bossing people around, running a company, getting into politics. And I wanted to do something different. And I think really a lot of what makes a leader effective is starting from the self and working outwards. So that's the context of why my company has a very long name. I think the Self Leadership Initiative captures this idea that I'm wanting to help people discover their self leader, their inner leader. And that's what the empowerment is all about.
Awesome. That's amazing, and it's making a difference and doing things differently, as you said. I think it. I think that's the thing. Like I think in a lot of things that we look at, we tend to have one kind of translation for things. Whereas, like you've decided to re. Would you say revolutionize or evolutionize or revolutionize, like how people view leadership, and how
I
it
don't
can
know
be
that I
applied.
can take credit, because the term self leadership was around before, but
Yeah.
certainly I want to evolve that conversation. Yeah, I
Okay.
think evolve is a good word that you picked out there.
Okay. Okay. Is it teamwork already, working together, helping each other there? So that's brilliant, and I think it's fantastic that you're doing this, and you're helping people discover ways of attacking challenges or resolving conflicts within teams that haven't been done before. Like I think one thing I noticed from your content, because obviously I checked out her content, guys. You need to go and check it out. If you're watching this or listening, you need to go and check it out. It's really really eye opening, and it's really really helpful. But you've got practical ways of addressing certain issues, and I think it's having that. It's helpful because I think a lot of people go through those scenarios in the workplace or at home or wherever they are in group gatherings. They have moments where things like that happen, and they don't know how to navigate themselves. So people stick to what they know, like they react how they would normally react instead of assessing the situation, reading the room. Is my reaction going to be appropriate, inappropriate, you know the whole thing.
Hmm.
So it's important, I think, and something that your business obviously brings to light is obviously how people can approach those scenarios differently.
Yeah, and I think the how is a passion of mine, because when I trained to be a teacher, I focused on the primary years, so from ages 6 to 10, which is an age group where you can't, or you shouldn't sit them down and just talk at them. We learn
Yeah.
through doing. And as we grow into our teens and adulthood, there's less learning through doing and more just read a book, listen to a lecture, and now you know how to do this thing. But actually, when it comes to resolving conflict or setting your goals, um, delivering a presentation, you can read books, you can listen to a podcast for inspiration, but you're
Mhm.
only going to get good at it by the practice. And so when I'm working with people to deliver training programs, I avoid PowerPoint where I can. Online the slides can be helpful, but actually it's about having that discussion time, the practice time, and saying to people, let's work through a conflict scenario. Let's simulate a disagreement and work out what is your natural pattern. How do
Mhm.
you normally respond to this? And let's build in self-reflection to build awareness. So with all of the training that I do, I very much focus on that practical element where people get to do maybe like a baseline, they work out, they go into a situation blind and suddenly realize, oh, this is the current level of my listening skills. I didn't realize that I was, glossing over what somebody else was saying, or that I was getting irritated and therefore responding sharply to somebody. By giving people that feedback, they've got a starting point. Then you can do the theory, but then you practice it through continued activities, simulations, discussions. And when you make it real for people, it becomes relevant. They can see it helping them in their lives in that moment. And so they're motivated to keep going with it and to progress in their learning. If learning is only a theoretical task, you don't engage with it in quite the same way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's very true. And in what you said, the word initiative popped into my head, because you have to get started and people need to realize where they are first before they can plan a way forward. And it's really, really like eye-opening as well, like having simulations on how things can happen and different outcomes. Like it's not, I don't think that happens like in theory, like you said, because it helps people engage and people are there and they're attentively listening. Whereas if you're watching a PowerPoint and it's not really engaging, you're not really seeing anyone, you're not getting reactions. Whereas like you're actually getting reactions, you're getting people's you're seeing people's behaviors. I'm pretty sure you've heard of the Johari window. Was it
Yes.
Jabari or Johari window? So people
Johari
get to
window.
so people get to see their Johari window in real time, in person as well. It's not like somebody wrote down, oh, this is what you do. What they can actually witness it for themselves. And I think your sessions help people build up their self-awareness, because like you mentioned, some people do not realize they're behaving or they're acting in a certain way until it's pointed out to them, and they can only know that once it is pointed out to them. Whereas if they're people who are continuously going for your sessions, they'll know, oh wait, Gemma's going to catch me out here because I'm doing that thing again.
And actually, I did some workshops with some young people, and I can't remember exactly what this young person said. I can't remember if they said I was devious or a villain, or it's along the lines of evil mastermind, because I'd set really, really tough problem-solving situations, and they were
Yeah.
frustrated that they couldn't solve it, but they recognised that that was important, because if it had been easy, there would have been no conflict, there would have been no stress to cope with, they wouldn't have been able to see how they, react in those conditions. And so every time I came along and said, right, we're going to do an activity, they were going, oh no, what fiendish thing have you got for us now? This is hard work. And it's like, good, learning should be hard work. And just to say as
Absolutely.
well, where you said about self-awareness, that's just reminded me, one of my kind of bugbears with traditional leadership education is people want to jump straight into, how do I manage people, get productive teams, manage resources, set up systems, and they're thinking about the big stuff, which is fine. But when you look at Daniel Goleman is one of the authors of Emotional Intelligence in Leadership, and he talks about emotional intelligence being a key skill for all leaders, and there's 4 layers to it. You have self-awareness, which is knowing what's going on within you. Then you have self-management. So if you're aware of what you can and can't do, how you react to things, how you're feeling, once you know that, you can then start regulating and saying, okay, this is my stress response, what am I going to do about it? So the first 2 steps are all about the self. Then you move into social awareness, what's going on with other people. And then you go on to managing relationships, conflict resolution, team building. And so traditional leadership skips to phase 4 without making sure steps 1 to 3 are covered. So a lot of people find it unusual when they come to me and I talk to them about things like journaling and coaching and reflective practice, and we do a game and then we have a debrief, and it's all very much about them evaluating the self, and they're kind of thinking, hold on, when do I get to boss other people around? No, like self-awareness first, because then you're going to be so much better equipped to go into that leadership position. And that's really the angle that I'm working at. And I'm really glad to hear more and more people are recognizing the importance of that. But we still need a lot more voices talking about doing it that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're right. I think a lot of people want to jump from one step and they want to go to the top of the staircase instantly, and they don't know it's a process that you have to go through step by step. And I think when you mentioned at the beginning that you've worked with young people and they think that, you know, they say that you're devious and you put them in hard situations. I think what they don't realize and the value you're adding to them is you're giving them the opportunity to work through difficult situations at a young age, versus when they're a lot older. So by the time they get older, when they're faced with similar situations, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, Gemma taught me how to approach the situation in a strategic, conscientious, in a thorough way, right? Looking at every single aspect in the way you've obviously demonstrated and trained people in, versus if it was somebody who's a grown adult like ourselves and they're facing these kind of challenges for the first time, and throughout their life they haven't faced any sort of issues or challenges. It becomes a bit of a steep mountain to climb, and I think that's when a lot of people tend to pull the plug, I say, on a lot of the things that they want to work on instead of like pushing through or seeking mentorship. Or because I think a lot of people are, what's the word, they are afraid of obviously putting themselves in that position that, okay, I'm struggling with this, I need help. They'd rather say, oh, you know what, I've got too much pride, let me just pull out with my dignity intact, and then, you know, just walk away, instead of just, okay, this is my situation, let me see how I can address it. Is there anyone I need to talk to? Is there any research I need to do I need to find SLI? You know, all of those things? So I think a lot of people, I think what you're doing, obviously, it's very, very valuable, and it's extremely valuable to the younger generation as well.
Thank you. And yeah, there's a definite difference in attitude, because a young person has some sense that I don't know everything. I'm still learning about the world. And there's an element of open-mindedness that comes with that. With adults, as you say, there might be an element of pride, but there can also be taking things for granted. So I am always fascinated when I do coaching and active listening and conflict resolution sessions with adults, because one of the key skills there is good listening. And so if I walk into a room full of adults and say, right, we're going to do listening skills, they kind of, what? We're grown adults, we know how to listen. And you get resistance. So I've stopped having that battle. What I do is I get them to play a game or do a scenario that's a little bit tense, a little bit devious, and then they end up not listening to each other. And then we can say, oh, so how are your listening skills? And they go, oh, not that great. Okay, we're ready to learn from you now. So with adults, I have to have a different approach. Young people, they're more up for learning in theory because they know they've got gaps, but also what if they learn it early, they've got so many years to use it well. And that's exactly why I got into doing what I was doing, because I learned about all of this stuff when I was 16, and I'm 31 now. And I've just had such a head start in life for having these skills, for reading some of the, you know, the business books, Stephen Covey, Viktor Frankl, Simon Sinek, all the business leaders that I'm sure listeners who are interested in this industry, you know those names and would get into in their adulthood. To get that at a young age just changes your mindset and helps you take measured risks, go for goals, and recover from setbacks in a completely different way.
Absolutely, absolutely, you're right. We have to build towards the future and giving the youngsters any sort of tools that they can, you know, to help themselves. It bolsters our chances of improving and growing as a society, you know, continuously evolve, and introduction of all these new things, the technology and how people think and all that stuff. But yeah, that's very, very important. So without further ado, we'll move on to the next question now. And this one, I think it'll get the listeners a bit more fascinated and intrigued about you personally, Gemma. But can you tell the listeners what your passions are and what you love most about them?
I consider myself to be quite a creative person. So obviously I've already talked a little bit about work passions, very much passionate about education.
Yeah.
I love working with young people in work, but outside of work, I have friends with young children, and I absolutely love rolling around on the carpet, building forts and towers, and getting messy with art stuff. I think there's something very liberating about being around children because they have no filter in the way they see the world. There's a sense of curiosity and wonder, which is brilliant. I like arts and crafts projects, so in my spare time I dabble with things like cross stitching, glass painting. I've done tie-dye t-shirt painting, and I try all sorts of different creative expression things. I'm quite passionate about cooking, so me and my partner go through a bit of a world menu. At the moment, we're having a Caribbean phase and an Indian phase, but we really like trying to go to our local market and buy authentic ingredients and say, right, we've never used plantain before. How can we make a meal with that? And so it's quite nice for giving us a sense of connecting to global citizenship, and we live in a busy city where we've got access to those things, so we really want to make the most of it. And I guess another passion of mine is board games. I'm just such a big fan of any form of play. So I love that. When I say board games as well, some listeners I'm sure will jump to Monopoly and like, no, Monopoly. Let's not get into that one. I like board games where you have to explain, negotiate, tell stories, or there's some skill involved, not where the family just get cross at each other and you promote capitalism. So we'll sweep that one under the rug.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Monopoly, it's a fascinating game, and it can end it can start wars within families and feuds that can last years, especially whenever you only have like gatherings where you meet like once a year, and people will
And
leave.
everybody's traumatized.
Yeah, and everyone leaves like a bit like, oh, I'll get you next year, get you next year. But I think I love how you've mentioned all those passions. I think working with young people, like you said, they have uh, they have no filter. They live their lives, they express themselves how they please, how they feel like it, and you really get a sense of when you work well with children. When you have that nurturing ability and you're able to build relationships, it helps. Um, and you understand yourself as a person as well, and see where you can grow. I think I also like the fact that you and your partner are outgoing. You're trying various dishes. You're cooking different dishes, but the thing is, you're learning and you're expanding and you're diversifying yourself more and more and more. Whereas a lot of people tend to like stick to, obviously, there's nothing wrong with people obviously sticking to what they know, but there's a lot of what's the word, would you say, bravery, and there's a lot of growth that happens when you say, okay, I'm going to go out on my comfort zone today. I'm actually going to attempt to prepare, like you said, a Caribbean dish or an Indian dish or something from the Oceanias, like from Singapore or from Thailand or from Indonesia, something traditional and something that helps you connect with the culture there. You learn more about, if you don't make it perfectly the first time, you're like, okay, now I know what to do, how to prepare it next time, so that in the event that you have make friends, excuse me, if you make friends with people from Indonesia or for people from the Caribbean or people from wherever, you could say, well, a good icebreaker is, oh, I've made this dish from your country. I'm happy to try it, or to make it again for you to try something like that. And people, I think, out of just fascination that you've mentioned a dish that they know about, they probably love the dish, they want to see how you make it, and then they eat it with you, and it gives them a sense of reconnecting with home if they're abroad and all that stuff. So that's really, really powerful. And obviously board games, yeah, board games are good. And like you said, cross stitching. And I think there's a group in the UK, based in the Northeast. It's run by a good friend of mine called Jenny Crawford. It's called Wellbeing Plus. So they do a lot of those things like cross stitching. They make, I forgot what it's called. When you make art with books, where
Oh,
you
they fold
fold,
the edges.
yeah, book folding.
Yeah.
And then they make it into like patterns, like birds, and type, or like printing out somebody's name, like with using books, that kind of stuff as
Mm.
well. Like, but it's a case of like bringing people together, eliminating like social isolation, helping people who have little social contact, get social, like build friendships with people, actually interact, have something to do, and not just
Yeah.
sit at home and wonder. So it's really, really inspiring that obviously you're doing all of those things as well.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. And with that, I think it brings us perfectly into the next question. And this question is obviously about your inspirations. So can you tell the listeners about your inspirations and how they've made or left a positive impact on yourself?
So whenever I'm asked about my inspiration, like I always come to the same person and the same kind of key moment, really. So as
Yeah.
I mentioned briefly earlier, I went to a leadership program when I was quite young,
Mm-hmm.
and the gentleman running that program was he's called Krish Raval, and he's really my mentor in life and an inspirational figure. He was running these programs, which obviously gave me a lot of skills at the time, which was the
Mm-hmm.
start of that inspiration. But he had a real attitude of abundance and community spirit. And so when we'd done our program of leadership training, there might have been 30 of us. And he said, okay, anybody who's enjoyed this, found it interesting, you can come back and volunteer to mentor others and we will teach you how. So I thought, great, I'm up for this. And that started a relationship where every year I would come back and learn a bit more about mentoring and then a bit about coaching, and then eventually started saying to him, oh, you're doing this activity. Have you thought about writing a resource sheet to go with it to give people to take home? And I've just learned, I've got an idea for a game. Would you mind if I do a 10-minute energizer at the beginning? And eventually he kind of coached me and trained me up to train others. And I was doing that alongside learning to be a teacher as well. So the two fit really nicely. So that's really been integral to my path. But another interaction that always sticks in my mind with Krish is that when I was about 19, my mum and dad were going through quite a lot of difficult arguments, and Krish had got a background in psychotherapy. And I said to Krish, would you mind teaching me some family therapy so that I can help my family out, because they can't afford to go and see a professional. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm on top of it, it will be cost effective. And what I really presented with that question, I think a lot of people would put a boundary in and say, it's not really your job to do that. It's a lot of a burden for somebody of your age to deal with. Let me recommend a service, something like that. But what Krish said is, I've got a book in mind. We'll meet once a week. We'll go through the chapters together. We'll look at the exercises, talk about it. And I can't remember how long this lasted for, whether it was 6 or 8 weeks. But by the end of that series, I realised myself that it wasn't my burden. So that taught me a lesson about the power of coaching and giving people space and walking alongside people as they learn things at a pace that's ready for them. So instead of him sort of just telling me, this is what you need to know, he let me feel my way into that. And so I like to think that I'm using that approach when I work with others, that sometimes I don't give the answer. I give people the circumstances that let them discover the answer, and I ask the right questions, and I hold space for people. And I think that really sticks with people compared to just being, told what the end result should be. When you fast forward people to that conclusion, if they're not ready for it, they resist, or it creates dissonance. Actually, if you work alongside people, it really supports their growth.
Absolutely. Wow. Yes. That is a fantastic that's a fantastic answer. Shout out to Krish. If you're watching this, we're sending our best to you, and thank you for inspiring and lighting the fire inside Gemma, who's making positive inroads on her end today. So we'd like to thank you again, Krish, and we hope you're well, and and you're making a positive difference. If he's still working there, I hope if he is, continue to keep up the good work, and we wish you the best in that.
So I get the pleasure of still working with Krish to this day, even though I
yes.
run my own business. We very frequently collaborate. So as well as being the start of my journey, the inspiration, it's a great privilege to call him a friend and practically a family member at this stage. And we've seen each other grow over the years as well, which is really lovely.
Exactly. And I think before I forget, before I move on to the next question, but when you mentioned that in terms of the coaching aspect, walking alongside the people you're coaching or mentoring and helping them discover the answers, because in you're helping them build their problem solving skills, your scenarios and your games and all the simulations you engage in. You're getting people to think. You're putting them in positions to think, because in many ways, I don't know whether this connotation helps, but it's like, if you think of being thrown into the deep end of the pool, not knowing how to swim, you're going to learn how to swim because you want to survive and you don't want to drown. So, but in your ways, it's not, in no way is anyone drowning or anything like that, but they get in that position where now they have to they have to think, they have to work with others, they have to assess themselves, they have to assess how the room and everyone else is feeling, and get everyone engaged, and start that whole essence of not bossing people around, but you want to understand who you're working with. Even if you're the superior, you understand who you're working with. How can you motivate them to get to that next level? How can they motivate you to get to that next level? That kind of a thing. So it's a reciprocal thing. So that's how I've kind of digested and taken all of that in. And I think, if there are any books you can, I think I'll probably ask you this towards the end of the podcast, but I think I would be fascinated for you to share any books with the listeners as well, and everyone who's watching this as well. But we'll move on to the next question, and I think I feel like the answer you gave in the previous one kind of covers it, but is there any experience you've gone through that has shown you that positivity still exists in the world and in people?
There's so many examples of positivity. I think it's just about being open to it and knowing where to look, and recognizing that if you're in a situation that's negative, toxic, it's okay for you to put a boundary in and go elsewhere. I have had the great pleasure of attending so many kind of conferences and networking events and projects where people are really active and doing exciting things. So through my connection to Krish, I got involved in a network called the School for Changemakers, which is all about young people interested in social change and action. And actually, that's the start of me learning to be more of a global citizen and diverse. Up until going to school for Changemakers, I ate a very bland meat and two veg diet, and you wouldn't catch me cooking Caribbean food or even eating a curry. So, but through that network, I've met people who've become long-term friends from all different faith backgrounds, different careers, different, socio-economic backgrounds, who are all really interested in making their corner of the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And collaborating together on that. So that's always been a great source of positivity. And then sort of from there, been involved in children's rights conferences. So a few years ago, there was a conference called Children as Actors for Transforming Society. And then another side project from that called Act Together, which is about intergenerational working. And again, it's just beautiful to be able to run workshops or be in a room where you've got a 6-year-old and a 60-year-old talking about how do we address domestic abuse in different countries. And the 6-year-old has got valid ideas about, their language and expression around abuse is obviously needs to be age appropriate, but they know enough of, and they've got ideas. And if you step back and if you teach adults to really listen and use that, it's so exciting. And so there's all these moments of positivity. And then again, working with, I do a lot of work at the moment with refugees who are settled. So they've been in I guess a new host country for a number of years and are now thinking, how do I use my experience to do some good in the world? And they just have the most fantastic ideas because, unfortunately, they have had to be resilient because of the circumstances they've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
But that has given them a certain fire in their belly that when they're ready to give back, when they've got capacity to, because their life is settled, they really understand some of the challenges the world faces. And instead of being negative and being a victim, even though they are a victim, even though it wasn't their fault, they're standing up and saying, I'm going to make a difference here. I'm going to address this need in the community. This is how I'm going to do it. I want to collaborate. And again, there are so many examples of people doing wonderful things that aren't amplified. The news is always the doom and gloom stuff. Don't believe that. Get yourself a different news channel. Listen to the podcasts of the good stories, because there is so much wonderful stuff out there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and it does make a difference when you kind of change the atmosphere a little bit, how you view the world, how you interact with people and all that. I remember there was a video that my mom shared with me recently. It was from an interview. I forgot who was being interviewed, but I think it was in the 1960s or 1970s, and the guy who was getting interviewed, he asked the press. He said, I have a question for all of you. All of you are here to manifest and produce negative news. Why are you never reporting news that's actually making a difference in the world, that's adding value, that's giving people empowerment, giving people hope? Because that's what people need, obviously, to power through, obviously get through their challenges, also make a difference, like not play the victim, look at their situation, want to address their situation, and make sure that what they've gone through, they don't want the next person to go through what they've gone through, that kind of situation. Like, why aren't they promoting that? And I think in the video, the media, the press, I don't know what they're called, journalists, are they called journalists or reporters? They were just stunned into silence, and they stood there and they were like, wow, how is this guy asking us these questions? They say they're reporting the news, but like the news that they're reporting, it should offer some sort of hope and some sort of like give people that feeling that things are progressing in some way. People are like stepping up. People are doing this, not like you said, not doom and gloom. Like, and I think how and I know how, like, in the last 2 years, like how we've been impacted by the pandemic and how it's It's impacted the way people think, the way they act, the way they view things, what they see on TV. I think a lot of people I've spoken to have said that they don't watch TV anymore because or they turn on and
Too
see
depressing.
something negative. Yeah, exactly. So I encourage everyone listening, obviously, and watching, engage yourselves, watch and listen to positive podcasts. I'm pretty sure you know a couple. There's Jay Shetty's podcast, there's
Mm.
Lewis Howes, there's Sadhguru. There's so many people that are making a difference, or who are trying to be the light in a world of darkness. So it does make a difference. Like, and I think what you said, that because I think when I was in the Northeast, um, my enterprise, they're called Launchpad at my university at Teesside. They work with refugee groups who want to start their own businesses.
Mm.
So they've worked with a number of people who've come in and shared their stories, like how they've come from. One guy came from Syria, the other guy came from Bangladesh. They talked about their whole process of going from being a refugee or an asylum seeker to being an entrepreneur, and how they wanted to get started, like making a difference, making an impact. And they were told, no, you have to stay, you have to wait a little longer and all that. But people are ready and fired up to get started and make a difference, and they're being asked to wait. But those stories, when and actually got to meet some of these guys, who one guy, he's got his own bakery in Darlington, which is, I think, west, is it west, yeah, west of Middlesbrough, if you've ever been up to those parts of the country. And then the other guy, he's based in Newcastle, he works for a company in Newcastle. So they were just talking about how they overcame, you know, that all of those challenges, mentally,
Mm.
psychologically, physically, dealing with the processes and things that they had to go through. But they stayed resilient. They stayed patient, and at the end of it, they were standing tall and proud. Like, look at me, I overcame all of this. So it
Yeah.
really made a massive difference. So thank you for also bringing that up, because it sent me back to it sent me back to that moment, where I went, where I actually experienced that as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Welcome. And I think that just emphasizes how much these stories stick with us. When you hear a real person's story of transformation
Mhm.
or resilience or success, it really motivates you to think about what, not in a competitive way, but what can I do? If they can do that, what does that mean for me? And how do I make the most of the time and the aspirations and the skills that I've got? Mm.
Absolutely. Like, I think that's made me think of, like, I think, like you said, like, it's not envy or jealousy or anything. It's kind of like motivation. Like, if this person is can go through this and overcome it, then so can I. I
Mm.
don't know if you're a sports fan, but the story of Tom Brady, the probably the most successful quarterback in NFL history. He was drafted in the sixth round. He was picked after 198 people. Like, he thought he was going
Oh.
to go, he was going to get picked a lot earlier, but he was picked. He was the 199th pick. He was always the person that they weren't fully invested in at the time, but he worked hard, he proved it, and he's got the resume that speaks for himself. So that's also, I
Mm.
have like the documentary of his entire story, of his entire draft story. So I listen to that often, and I'm like, if he's gone through all of this and come out and made himself such a huge personality who's making a positive change, then I can also work in my own, at my own pace, in my own lane, to make a positive impact, to be somebody who can be of influence as well in the world.
Mm.
Absolutely. So, we'll move on to the next question. I think this one will also test the problem solving skills you have, and the ones you've shared with your students and trainees and all that. But can you tell the listeners, like, how you've overcome periods or moments of how you've overcome challenges, and like how you've managed stress during those periods as well.
So my students will tell you that my favorite answer to every question is it depends, because that's a hypothetical. Sometimes a hypothetical example can't give a real answer. So
Yeah.
one layer to how I deal with challenge is that I'm very proactive about self-care, so that hopefully there isn't stress and challenge in the first place. And what I mean by that is I use lots of time management tools to make sure that I'm prioritizing what I'm doing in my week so that I don't get overwhelmed. I try to go out for a walk 3 times a week so I'm getting fresh air. I'm mindful of my diet. I have a gratitude journal. So lots of the practices that are recommended by positive psychology for looking after your well-being, I do them anyway on a regular basis so that increases my capacity for stress. That's not the reason I do it, but because I'm looking after myself and topping up my energy, because I'm, I guess investing in my well-being, it means I can probably cope with a lot more than I could do if I wasn't doing those things. So that's one element, and I think something that we're not taught enough about. Lots of people will go, okay, now I'm in a crisis, how do I fix it? Rather than having the conversation, how do I just make sure that my lifestyle is really balanced so that I can cope with what the world throws at me. Having said that, obviously challenges do come up, and it depends what the kind of challenge is. I think when there've been very emotional challenges, such as the unexpected death of a family member, or as I said, conflict with my mum and dad, big things like, well, I suppose they're the more, or a breakup, they're the emotional ones. I think one of the things that really helps me is social support. So I've got a fantastic network of friends. And not everybody would use the word network. The reason I say that is through all these conferences and trainings, I have friends all over the country of different backgrounds. And so compared to most people who would make friends in a workplace or based on their geographical location, like who you went to school with, what connects us is this shared sense of an interest in activism or learning about our inner self and identity. We have those deep philosophical conversations. And so that means when I am going through a period of challenge, if I speak to those friends about it, they can go beyond the traditional approach. So for a lot of people, if your friend comes to you with a problem, you either kind of, there, it will be okay, polite reassurance, but that's not helpful. Or you kind of say, oh, don't worry, it's not so bad, you play it down, or you give them advice. They're kind of the main defaults. And they're nice, they're what we're supposed to do, but they don't help that much. Whereas the types of friends I've got they're really good at active listening. So they fully help me to talk through the problem so that I can just not vent, because vent sounds negative, but I can fully express and get it off my chest. And then they're good at asking those kinds of questions of, so what are you thinking of doing about it? They're not telling me what to do. They're just helping me work through a process. And I think not everybody has access to that skill set, but if you have friends who are excellent listeners and who can help you to work through something, it makes a real difference. At times when I don't have, if I'm not ready to go to those people, or it doesn't feel appropriate, I use journaling to kind of go through the same thing, where I'll write down, oh my goodness, this is the problem, this is why it's upsetting me. And then I'll start thinking, well, why is that? What does that say about my identity? What is it about this that's triggering or problematic for me? And how might I overcome it? What are my options? Which one do I think? And I kind of coach myself through the process. And if something takes a long time to deal with, I reread the journal and think, right, what have I already tried? What have I already thought about? What haven't I? So I take quite a logical approach to trying to address those challenges, which again is not a skill set that a lot of people would have access to. Me kind of explaining that here on the podcast, hopefully some listeners will think, oh, okay, I'll have a go at that. But other people might not know where to start because it's an unusual approach. It's not something that we get to practice very often. So really, really recommend working with a coach or doing some journaling is a good starting point for going through a challenge or an issue.
All right. Wow, that's very, very in depth. Like that's a thorough breakdown, guys. So it gives us all like a sense of looking at the, like you said, like at the challenge from a holistic point of view. I think, like you said, having that social support, um, like I said, I'm also trying to avoid using the word network there, but like having friends who are very good with active listening skills, like, and then like you said, it kind of encompasses what you're already like teaching, like people are listening and they're letting you express yourself, and then they're asking you questions that are getting you to think and come up with solutions in your head and what you think is the best way to approach or take on or tackle a challenge. And it helps you because at the end of it, when the solution pops into your head like a light bulb turning on, you can feel proud that you faced this challenge, and through that guidance, or even if it's self-guidance, like you listen to yourself, you journal, you take notes, and you read through, and you really reflect on what's happened. When you come up with the solution to overcome that or mediate that challenge, then you can really have a sense of pride that you managed to dig yourself out of out of a hole. I'd say I'll say it like, because you've equipped yourself with the skills, and it's something like what you said that people can take on, like as they're listening to this podcast or watching it, that they can apply to themselves. And I wouldn't say go and apply it on the biggest challenge in your life, like straight away. Like you have to,
No.
yeah, you have to
When I
start small.
do things like conflict resolution, springs to mind, and I'll say to people in the session, right, we're going to pick a real conflict in your life that's happened, and we're going to analyse it. But on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0, it wasn't a problem at all, it was fine, and 10, it's the most traumatic thing you've ever been through, we're only going to pick something from 0 to 4. Because if you're trying to learn a skill, such as how to process a challenge, problem solve, and you go for the biggest thing you can think of, chances are you'll be emotionally overwhelmed and you won't have the bandwidth to do the skill practice. So it's always better to learn skills with the safety net that you've got a smaller package, a smaller item to deal with, because then you're able to be more thoughtful and reflective. You've got more energy to spend on the process, whereas when something is really tough, it demands all of your energy, and it can be even harder to be objective or remember the theories and the models or whatever it is you're trying to implement. And that's why it's really good to practice these things before challenges occur. So again, I've done so much work already on conflict resolution, non-violent communication, setting boundaries, time management, so that when these challenges came along, I'll just use that tool that I already know about. Whereas people who don't know about something, if you're already in a mess and then you've got to go and learn something and come back to your challenge, it's a lot harder. So acting in a proactive, preventative way is always a fantastic solution, but people may not be motivated to learn something until they realize they need it. And that's another challenge there.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. Prevention is better than cure, and tackling the biggest challenge in your life would lead obviously to mental burnout. So you have to build up those skills and those tools that you need to face them, because I think even in positions of that, if you're overwhelmed and stuff, like, you tend to forget. So it's something that you need to, what's the word, you have to embed it in and integrate it into the way you think, you act, so that it comes naturally, so that
Yeah.
you're not in panic. You're already like, okay, I'm already thinking of ways of how I can approach this and how I can deal with it. So that's very, really, really, really important. So the next question, and I'm interested. I'm also intrigued myself to get your take on this. But what do you think is the most valuable thing about failure?
I would be tempted to reword the question on the basis that so failure has this connotation of, nothing's worked at all, and it's very
Yeah,
black and white, pass fail, when quite
yeah,
often there's a shade in between. And so, again, from a teaching background, if you fail an exam, it's a complete write-off and you have to resit it. But there are very
yeah,
few situations in life where you can say that totally didn't work. It might be that this bit worked, but this bit needs improvement. So I try and avoid the word failure, but
yeah,
I understand the essence of the question, that when things don't go as we wanted, or when we don't achieve the goal fully, that there's definitely an opportunity there to learn all sorts of things. It's I guess this ties into some of the stuff around growth mindset, really.
mhm,
There's a lovely principle in neuro-linguistic programming that says failure is feedback.
mhm,
Every time something doesn't go to plan, and even when things do go to plan, there's so much opportunity to say what went well, why did it go well, what approach did I decide to take, how did I communicate, what was the plan, what resources did I use, what could I have done differently, what might I change next time. And so a lot of what I do with people in terms of the activities I run is I set them up to fail or have a challenge, and then say, okay, you had this challenge. It didn't go as smoothly as you would have liked, but what went well? Tell me about the things that you did that were positive to handle that, and celebrate those strengths. And also, what's the next step in your learning? What one thing might you work on differently next time, so that it's not going to be perfect next time either, but it'll be a
mhm.
little bit better than the time before. And so I quite like this idea of, failing upwards, that you may never get it 100% right, but each time you fail, or each time you face that challenge, you cope with it a little bit better. So I think if you have a growth mindset, that every interaction, every situation is an opportunity to learn. It's not about just performing well and ticking the box. It's about evolving and developing. Then mistakes, challenges are a real opportunity. And if you can be comfortable with them and willing to be vulnerable and say, I'll have a go, even if it's not going to go well, because at least I'll learn, that will set you miles apart from the people who are too scared to try, or the people who don't want that feedback.
Absolutely. And some motivation right there from Gemma, guys. You got to put yourself in that space. What you have to gradually get yourself to that space. You can't just jump nose dive straight in, and and go about, like, looking at those things. But I really like how you approach that question, because in many ways, like you said, failure tends to have a negative connotation, and people tend to forget the positive, or the hard work they've put in to get to that point, even if it didn't end the way they wanted to.
Mm,
We have a tendency to forget that all of the good things you did to get yourself to that point. You could have been in a competition, registered everything correctly, gotten through every single stage, and passed, and then at the final stage, you didn't win the gold medal or something like that. But you've managed to get yourself into the competition, you've done it
mm,
correctly, and you've gone through every single stage, and you've done well. And because you lost at the very end, you kind of like, you're forgetting that, hey,
yeah.
you're forgetting what you've built, up to that point. So like you said, having it's a growth mindset, and the more failures you go through, the more adaptive you become, the more open-minded you become, the more appreciative and grateful you are, and you're like, okay, I now have another opportunity to overcome something, or to beat something that's pulled me back, or something like that. And you get fired up. Or and for me personally, I can get fired up and say, this is the challenge. It's time to put on the get yourself out of this mess hat, and really work hard, and come up with a sustainable solution that can help, or that can be passed down to the next person who may go through that. And in many essence, the whole essence of this podcast existing, is you've got people like yourself coming on, sharing their story, sharing their background, sharing how they approach certain challenges, um, you know, giving people the insight to say, okay, there is a generic way of doing things, and then there's, um, like you said, a positive psychologist way of approaching this situations. And obviously, like when you're approaching something, if you're positive and if you're optimistic about it, there's a higher chance of you overcoming it than if you're pedantic. Was that the word,
Or
pedantic?
pessimistic.
And pessimistic? Yeah. So there's a higher chance of success with the uplifting mindset than with the down down pushing mindset as well. So that's a very, very fantastic answer. So in
And
that
I've just
you gone.
thought of something else I'd like to add as well, is that where you said
Sure.
about passing it on,
Yeah.
there's a definite spirit that the more we learn as a society, as a world, we've got so much knowledge to pass on. That's quite exciting. We don't have to discover electricity every generation, because we just tell the next generation, hey, we've
Yeah, how
got
to
this
do
thing,
it.
it's great. But there are some times when it is valuable not to tell people all the answers, and to let them have those moments of failure. So, a silly example is a child on the climbing frame. There are some parents who will be, oh, you need to hold on tight, don't fall, don't do this, don't do that. And they're so worried about the failure or the mistake of the injury that they can really cushion. When actually, after 2 or 3 falls, that child is going to learn, oh, when I fall, it hurts. I want to hold on tighter. I want to, assess my grip.
Mhm.
It's a playful example, but there are times when it's useful to educate people and stop them making the same mistakes we've made. But there are other times when it's good to let people make their own mistakes and have that bit of failure, because then that moment is real for them and they get to have the learning themselves. And it can be difficult to judge that balance of when to give people their own space and just be near them, walk alongside them, and when
Mhm.
to kind of protect and prevent.
Yeah. That's a very fascinating point, actually. I think in many ways, I don't think, like, that example is really good, because with when you're working with when you've got little children who are playing on a jungle gym or something like that, I think they have to learn for themselves, and us as individuals identify. I think from that, I think the only challenge we'll have is identifying the moments where we guide people, and then the moments where we let them spread their wings and let them fly, and let them figure it out for themselves, or learn that actually I shouldn't do things this way, I should do things a different way. So that's a very that's it's been it's a mind opening experience today. So it's getting me thinking as well. So thank you for your answers. So
Oh,
the
you're
next
most welcome.
the next question, right? I think as well, it kind of gives you a sense of obviously looking forward. But what would you say excites you about the future going forward?
I think people are getting more ready to do things differently.
Mm.
I don't know how long it will take, but where we've had the pandemic and working from home, that's changed people's attitude to what's possible in the world of work. And where parents have had to homeschool and seen what their kids have been learning and gone, oh, this isn't necessarily all useful stuff. There are some conversations about, well, what would be useful instead? And there's so many wonderful stories of, entrepreneurs, inventors, refugees, all sorts of people doing things that are exciting. And there's a wall of media noise, trying to just focus on the bad stuff. But I think what's interesting is that pockets are bubbling up, and I think that if enough people are interested, we could see a real shift to different ways of designing society, of changing our priorities. There are some countries globally that have talked about moving away from GDP, national produce as the outcome of a country, and are talking instead about happiness and well-being, which would be a wonderful shift. There are some discussions about universal basic income, and if we've got automation and robots and we don't need to do the menial jobs, there are the doom and gloom people who say we'll all be unemployed, how terrible. But then there are other people who say, well, actually, if you had free time on your hands, what would you do with it? And there are so many people who would create or would spend time with family or would educate. And we're not quite there yet, but I feel like that conversation is slowly being had more often. And I'm hopeful that in my generation, maybe in my lifetime, things will be a bit more open-minded in that sense. And hopefully I want to be part of that conversation and help people to have it and facilitate, people. A lot of what I do is more about saying, well, what's your goal? What are you passionate about? And let me help you to develop skills on the way. So I really like that I'm part of other people's stories, and they go off and do the project, or they go and reach their goals, and I've just helped to fit some of the pieces together for them. So that really excites me about the future, seeing what the people I've already worked with are going to do, and thinking about who else might come through the door and what things they might be involved with.
Exactly, and I think I would add on to that, like with what you said about identifying or quantifying what is deemed something that people need to learn, obviously to help themselves. I'm pretty sure you've seen all over, like in blogs or websites or YouTube videos, people have made the argument that in schools, children should learn about finances, decision making, potentially getting into business, understanding that aspect, how to become creative with themselves, because a lot of children, not only in the UK, but I think globally, have got a lot of brilliant ideas in their heads that are sitting there, like spiraling, like in circles, but they don't have the the atmosphere or the support. I want to say the support circle. I'll say circle, like where they can get their idea to manifest their idea, get assistance or guidance on the idea, get them get them in a position where they're getting asked the questions and they develop their idea even more and more and more, instead of being told what to do. Help them get their own answers, in develop something that they will grow to like, and expand and then share with the next person or whoever. So those kind of things. And in many ways, like, oh yeah, you're going to say something.
And that there's two sides to that problem. So children are naturally so creative. I remember when I was doing my teacher training, one of the lecturers told us about a study where they presented children with a matchbox and said, "What is it?" And they also did it with teenagers and adults. So they did a different age groups, and adults just went, "Well, it's a matchbox." So yeah, but what else could it be? And they were like, "Oh, well, I suppose I could put pins in it," and they thought of a few things. Children said, it's a bed for a fairy person, or if I stack 3 matchboxes together, I've made a set of drawers, or I could draw a picture on the inside and pop it up and there'll be a cartoon, or maybe it could be a home for a spider. So in terms of natural creativity, we are so much more creative when we're younger. I think that the key in what you said there is it's the atmosphere. They've already got it, but we're kind of squashing it out of them. So how do you help children and young people to elevate the voice they already have and have the confidence to stick with it? But at the same time, how do you educate adults to not squash that creativity and to not be afraid of handing over power and saying, give them space and just see what they do? You're not the instructor at times, you're the safety net. Let them play around and see. And I think that requires a very different mindset in education to what we have now. And some individual teachers are excellent at doing this, but the overall culture of education isn't quite ready for that. But I'd like to think it will move that way. And if you look at the Nordic countries, they're a bit more into that leadership and independence, and saying to young people, well, what is it you'd like to learn and what's your project idea? And they do things a lot more cross-curricular. They have more scope to do what you're describing in terms of, really setting up enterprises instead of just the token, okay, we're going to have enterprise week, you're going to have a stall for parents at the end of the week, and we've secretly decided what it is you're going to do, but we're going to let you think it's your idea. No, let's move away from that and actually let them run with it themselves.
Absolutely. And I hope that comes to fruition sooner rather than later, and a lot more people if they create that space for young people. And I think not only young people, but I think in adults as well, I think we can create that space for ourselves. It's overcoming that mental hurdle or breaking through that mental block or that limiting factor that's holding us back from being our expressive, being fully expressive and being creative and all that. So I'm hoping, through this podcast, other podcasts that kind of enlighten people, that they can find the empowerment to say, actually, I've always wanted to get into maybe gardening or being is it a florist or being anything. Like people should feel empowered to be creative, do whatever they want, and not feel that sort of sense of guilt saying, oh, I'm doing something different from the norm, and I don't want to bring attention to myself, that kind of thing. But the thing is, you're doing it because you like it and you want to do it, so that should be more than enough to want to do it. But that's an ongoing thing. So we'll move on to the next. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
And it just reminds me, whether or not you enjoy his comedy, Jimmy Carr said something really lovely in an interview where he was saying about lean into the strengths you have and the things you love, because nobody needs. If you get a C at physics, there's no point studying to get a B, because we don't need a load of amateur physicists. If you're already good at English, do more of that and be excellent at it. So if your passion is for floristry, sport, and you sink loads of your time into doing that really well, that if everybody is an expert in the thing they're passionate about, how much power, creativity, potential innovation will we have in the world compared to just making everybody tick off maths, English, science, language, art? There'll be some things that we should be able to say, it's okay to drop that to make space for the thing that does put a fire in your belly. Because if you've got that fire, you're going to take it so much further than the people who aren't interested in it. But again, our education system is designed to help us have a broad experience, but, be average at everything. But we can't all be average at everything. That's not how averages work.
Yes. Exactly. Wow. Never thought of that as well. Okay. Oh wow. Yeah, I never thought of that. I think that's definitely that's gonna stick in my head now. But as we move on in the podcast, and I've been having a good time, Gemma. I don't know about you, but
Yeah. Excellent
um,
questions.
so the next question, I think, obviously, it's one of those that kind of helps everyone understand like how you tick, and what you've seen helps increase like increase your productivity, or your focus. But what would you say like helps you stay focused and productive when you're in that mode to get things done?
Hmm. There's a couple of things I can talk about here.
Mhm.
So the first thing, let me just grab. So this is my vision board,
All right.
and if people are interested, I've got a blog about vision boarding and how you might start your own. But every year, I do myself a vision board, and this is a visual representation of some of the goals that I have, the kind of lifestyle I want to lead, my passions, the people I care about. And what I find really motivating and focusing about that is that as you saw, I just grabbed it. It's right next to my desk where I'm working all day. So I
Mhm.
start the day by kind of looking at that, and that reminds me why I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing. So even if I'm doing the things that I don't like so much about my business, such as, managing the social media or writing a difficult email, that vision board is why I'm doing it, because I'm wanting to strive for these things, and this task helps me get there. But it
Mhm.
also
Mhm.
means that I have a clear picture of where I'm going. So when opportunities come along, I can ask myself, okay, is this a distraction and something that I need to put to one side, or actually does this help me manifest something that's in line with my vision? Is it in line with my values? So at the
Yeah.
big picture level, I think it's really good for people to take some self-reflective time to work out what matters to you, what are you aiming for. On a more practical day-to-day level, I really recommend time management tools. So there's something called sometimes it's called the Eisenhower box, or Stephen Covey talked about it as, he said, the importance urgency matrix, where when you've got all your tasks for the week, sort them out into which ones are important, to your important, they're going to help you reach your goals, get your vision board done, and which
Mhm.
ones are urgent. And there might be a mixture. So some things will be important and urgent. The things with a deadline, some things are important, but they're never urgent. And the challenge there is that if it's important but not urgent, we might never get round to it. So,
Yeah.
earlier you talked about learning a language. There's no deadline for you to do that. And if you're not managing your time well, you'll never get round to it. And then you'll beat
Mhm.
yourself up later or feel unfulfilled that you never did that thing that's important to you. So having a constant reminder of what's important can motivate you to say, right, let's tick off tasks early before they get urgent. So I've always got time for those important things.
Yeah.
And then another thing in terms of staying focused, staying motivated, is I'm very mindful of language. So if you read some of the stuff in neuro linguistic programming, NLP, that's about how the language we use impacts our behavior, our mindset. And if you take a task such as writing an email to a client, if you say, I need to, I must, I've got to, I have to, I should, all of those words give you a sense of heaviness, urgency, pressure. And they kind of imply, I need to, because if I don't, something bad will happen. I'll lose out on that work, or I'll break trust with the relationship, or they'll think I'm unreliable. And
Mhm.
because you're kind of sitting, those language choices can give you those heavy feelings, which are then demotivating. And because I know that, I make a conscious effort to avoid those words and say, right, let's scrap them. I'd like to, I'd love to, I want to for some tasks. Maybe there are tasks on the list that I don't actually want to do them, but I'm going to, I can, I will. And all of those
Mhm.
words, I'd love to, I'm going to, I can. So because if I do, I'm going to have this opportunity, or I'm going to build trust in that relationship, and it's going to be good for business, and you're focusing on the positive outcome, and because of that it gives you a little uplift. So in terms of staying motivated, focused, managing time, I really recommend that people pay attention to the language that they use, because if you can start by noticing what effect words have on you, you can kind of hack that. If saying I need to gives you a kick up the bum and gets you started, then say I need to. But if you find that it makes you feel rubbish because you're thinking about the bad stuff, swap it out for something that works. So, I will do this, I'm going to do this because this is the good outcome. And then I relate that back to the vision board. And there's so many cool tools like this that you can use on a regular basis. But if you don't know, you don't know, and you don't have them at your disposal. So I'm hoping that listeners, that gives you a couple of options to play around with.
Absolutely. And wow, yes, that is very, very true. Like I think before, like in many ways I've felt that the words we say have an impact, but not to that level where they could have a psychological effect in the back of your head. Like you could say, I need to do this, and immediately connect it to something bad. Like, whereas you said if you flip it, um, and you change the wording and you say, I will do this because it will enable me to, let's say, connect with my peers better, or I will go and do a course in PE because I love working with people and I love staying active, or things like that. Like we have to give ourselves that reinforcement as like a justification as to why we're doing it, because I think in many ways when we are doing things, I don't know. I think many of us have felt like, okay, I'm doing something, and then you ask yourself, why am I doing this? If you don't have the answer to that question, you kind of you put yourself in at a crossroads. Like, what am I doing here? Like, am I wasting my time? Am I making the most of my time? And I think, like you said at the beginning, before you even get started in something, once and once obviously you've used that positive reinforcement wording and you're doing things with a purpose and you've given yourself a reason why you're doing it, you're working towards it, knowing that at the end this will be the outcome. So
Yeah.
and that's also very, very important. And thank you for sharing that, because I don't think I would, it's one of those, like, I think a lot of a lot of the answers you've given today have been an eye opener for me now. So I really wonder, like, how they're going to be an eye opener for other people. Like I think a lot of people will probably be would be their mind will open, and their perspective on certain things will actually change, because you've come in and you've shown us, and you've obviously shown me, you've shown everyone, and everyone listening and whoever's watching, and like different ways of approaching challenges, and like how to view, let's say, doing things that are important to you, in many ways also dealing with procrastination in a way, because you when something's important but not urgent, you can procrastinate it and delay it, and you can push it down the line. Whereas if you create that importance, that urgency, that necessity for doing it, you are then elevating yourself to do it, and you're not doing it because, oh, I have to do it, but you're doing it because you want to do it, and you have the energy behind it. But thank you for sharing that, and that's really, really enlightening. So
Oh, you're very
um
welcome.
you're welcome. Yeah, I said you're welcome as well. But I think moving on to the next question as well. I think this one will be an interesting one, and I think you already do a lot of these things already. But can you tell the listeners, or what would you say, right, your strongest qualities are, and which qualities would you love to teach to somebody who's interested? Barring, I already know, see, you've given your background and what you're doing, and I feel like this question you've kind of answered it, but for the audience sake, like, what do you think?
I think creativity.
Mhm.
So a lot of people would jump to making stuff, arts and crafts, but which I do in my spare time, but creativity in terms of problem solving. And one thing that I like to do is if I read a book about leadership, business, or a model, the creative element comes to play, because I'll then think, right, how can I turn this into a game? How can I make a learning opportunity? How can I take this model, which is brilliant, but it's written on a page, and how can I make it active? So that's a really useful quality in my work, and I think creativity feeds into innovation. So, it's really good to develop that in people. Organisation, for sure. I'm very processed in the way I think. I think in tables and spreadsheets and like to get things in order, which can help with running a business, problem solving, project management, all that kind of thing. And communication's very broad. In particular, I think I'm very good at asking questions, in the sense that I ask careful questions that allow people to reflect. So when I'm teaching, and this is, I guess, the thing that I most am interested in teaching other people: active listening and asking good questions for kind of learning and development. And when I start teaching people about the basics of coaching and learning, I say, if somebody's just completed a team activity and you want them to reflect, there's an art to asking a good question. Because if I say to somebody, why did your team come last? Oh, they suddenly feel attacked and they feel it's horrible. And I've asked a question that's in theory trying to encourage reflection, but I've put them on the defensive and I've ruined that whole opportunity. So there's an art to asking questions that allows people to safely explore their identity, their skills, their progress, and to be able to pitch questions at the right level. So, I could ask you, where do you see yourself in 20 years' time, which is a huge chunk question. And for some people, that's overwhelming. Whereas I could also ask, well, what's your priority for tomorrow? And then there's every question in between in terms of size and scale. So I think understanding the value of good questions and being able to ask a question that gets people thinking is a definite strength that is helpful in my work, for sure, in terms of learning, but it also helps me to be a good friend. What I was saying earlier about when I'm facing challenges, when my friends are facing challenges and we want to talk through it, to be able to say, wow, how's that affecting you? And do you want advice, or do you want me to listen? And would you like to talk through it? And what are you thinking in terms of an action plan? All those kinds of things that give people space to work through something are really, really valuable.
Absolutely. And yes, there's a lot, like there's a lot of things that can be overcome or resolved with creativity, because when you think outside the box, you think of solutions that have never been thought before. I think I'm like you. Like, I think organization, you've got a list of things you want to do, you've got it all in order, the amount of time you want to dedicate to each things, what's the priority list, and all that. And like one thing you've mentioned, that creating that space for people to be heard, help them, or like get them in a position where they're answering, not necessarily answering their own questions, but they're coming up with solutions that will help them, because you're empowering them to come up with that, come up with those answers and those solutions. And it's not like you're saying, I want you to come up with the answer. You're saying it in a way that's very like it's subtle, it's indirect, it's encouraging somebody to open up and to express themselves, and to be creative, be problem solving minded, and all of those things. So those are three valuable areas, that are qualities that I probably want to take time and learn as well, because at the end of the day, it's all about growth, it's about development, and it's about how best can we all improve ourselves. Like, is today, well, I think, like today's what, Tuesday, Wednesday, think it's
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Like, is the Takura on Tuesday or the Gemma on Tuesday the same one that gets to Friday? Or are you somebody who wants to be by Friday? You want to be, you want to have gained a little bit of knowledge about something, or you want to have learned how to say, um, I love sports in a different language, that kind of a thing. So you want to put yourself in a position where you're constantly in that mindset that, okay, I always want to improve, and one victory is not the end. Like, there's going to be another thing I want to work on, etc., etc., etc. But it kind of leans into the next question as well. But this is something obviously for you to think about, and what you want to look at going forward. But would you say there's a skill or something new you're looking to learn and add to your skill set or your ability, like, to improve yourself, to improve the way you work, and all those things?
Yeah, so I guess just to reiterate what I said earlier with the kind of the Jimmy Carr joke thing, is that there's always the fine balance between, we're not good at everything, and
Yeah.
when it are there skills that I don't have, absolutely, but is it worth me spending the time getting average at that, or do I take something I'm already good at and develop it? So in my business, I'm not very strategy and marketing minded. I'm quite sort of, because I'm holistic and in the moment, I can do short-term organization, very good at details. But strategy is something that I don't like to think too long-term, because I keep things fluid and see what opportunities come up. But I have
Yeah.
recognized that that's a skill set worth developing, because it will help. And actually, is it next week or the week after, I'm starting an hopefully 8 to 12 months, depending on how long the assignments take, a diploma in transformational life coaching. I've
Ooh.
been coaching people informally for the last 10 years or so, but kind of thought, oh, well, I'm not qualified in this. And you don't know what you don't know. So if I do a formal qualification, again, I'm hoping to take something I think I'm already good at, coaching, active listening, asking questions, but to really refine that. So I think they're the two main areas that come to mind. Something I'm not so good at, the strategy and marketing, and let's just brush up so that it's not dire, and let's take something I'm really good at and lean into it even more, so that I can, really feel like an expert in that area.
Absolutely, and I wish you all the best in that. And it's one of those where I think, like you said, as you were working, you felt like, okay, I wouldn't lose anything adding onto my knowledge already, and getting a formal qualification. So with that, so hopefully, you start well and everything goes smoothly. And obviously, I wish you all the best in that. And
Thank you.
in closing, you're welcome. And in closing, what inspiring words would you like to leave with all of the people who've listened and watched your episode today?
I'm worried about borrowing somebody else's words, but some of the words that really help me are Mahatma Gandhi, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." And I think part of the ethos of that is, it ties into what I've been talking about self-awareness and reflection. And really, if you look inwards and you deal with your own identity, passions, goals, and you lead your best life, that creates such a positive ripple effect that it inspires other people, or it gives them permission to be vulnerable or to push themselves and try. And that really understanding what you care about, what you're passionate about, and being authentically you will have an effect in the community. You'll create a ripple that is really exciting. And so take that time to work on the self and get that right, because other people aren't going to do it for you. You have to really ring fence that time.
Absolutely. And it ties in perfectly into the last word of your business, which is initiative. It's about us taking that first step and taking action. So, on that note, thank you so much for joining me today. Before I forget, there is that question about book recommendations. If you have any book recommendations you'd like to leave with everyone who's tuned in today, go ahead and
Yeah,
share.
there's a number of different books. I love Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. However, I would recommend Sean Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teenagers, because I think there's just something different about hearing it in a simpler context. Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck is wonderful. Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl is very inspirational about kind of resilience and finding your calling in life. There's just so many wonderful resources out there. If people have Netflix rather than wanting to read a book, Brené Brown has a special on The Call to Courage, which is all about vulnerability and taking the leap and seeing vulnerability as a bit of a leadership power. So there's so many inspirational resources out there. Some of them are about teaching you skills and tools, and others are just about opening your mind to different ways of thinking, different ways of showing up in life. And I think the more of those that we expose ourselves to, the more you can then find out what fits your lifestyle and your values.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing all of those book mentions. Like, I think there's a number in there that can be really useful to people, especially if they want to keep things simple and not get overloaded with content or the context of how people explain, because obviously everyone explains differently. But thank you again for sharing that. And we've now reached the end of another fantastic episode here on the P.O.T.N podcast. I'd like to thank my guest, Gemma, for featuring. Thank you again, Gemma.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I guess as an encore, I'd say if you'd like to leave everyone where people can find the self leadership initiative, social media pages, website and all of that as well.
Yeah, so the website is the sli.co.uk, and if you go on there, there's a couple of resources, links to other podcasts, blogs that may capture things like how to write a vision board. I'm on Instagram as @selfleadership1. I have a YouTube channel where there's a few wellbeing videos, a few useful tools for people. There's a Facebook page and a LinkedIn page. Again, if you Google the Self-Leadership Initiative, it'll all come up.
Awesome. And I will also include these links in the bio as well for anyone who's looking to take initiative and start absorbing and learning from Gemma's teaching. So, with that note, I'd like to thank you all for listening and watching this podcast episode. Be sure to join me next time where I'm joined by another amazing guest and hear another amazing testimony here on the P.O.T.N podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, GeoSaven, Ghana, and all the other media platforms where this podcast is available on. Thank you all for listening in, and I leave you with the music written by Justin Vinyls featuring Zeke and Clifford Ngosa called Dark Rooms. Thank you all. Till next time, be well and take care.
Rooms just faze me. Mind is twisted, I can't be lost in the thought, but don't save me. This uncertainty is what tames me. I got a lot more problems that you ain't gon' hear from me. Lose the pep talk, I've got shit taken from me. I got a drink for the mild rise, got the blunt for the more rise. When I'm feeling myself, I don't see it. When these demons call, they ain't kidding. I wanna kill myself and I mean it. The speed is life and I'm slipping. Well, let me get the grip then. Try to defeat them, find the answers in the Jesus piece. Try to swim away from the deep end. I'm still alive, so I can't concede. I can't stand these hoes, no pros, there they go, wheelchair either. I'm afraid that these women will be cutting shit deeper. Shit is cold, no fever. I've been broken all season. I've been looking for a reason. Every week in amnesia. And all these people I'm analysis. I woke up in a dream. A life check was the medicine. Musical fed me, so fed to me cause I was on the string. I try to sing the chorus, show the shit the brains and stop the thing. Belongs to the type of people who cling. Or to a feeling that describes anger.
Drinking, thinking should I call you? I could tell you about my weakness, cause you're the one I'm missing.
I'm faded. Listen to these words and I'm painted. These dark rooms can't save me. Killing for you is overrated.
Lately, I've been thinking about the stars and what they can mean. Is it a sign from above or an empty dream? But these thoughts, all I have, they can set me free from these walls that I've been trapped in. Tried to drown in this pool of gin. That's when all the pain came rushing in. It got stuck in my lungs and I couldn't breathe. And your smile is the reason I couldn't sleep. The girl that I thought I once loved, the same girl that came from above, whose lips I thought was some kind of drug, turned out to be the forbidden fruit from Adam and Eve. I don't know why I couldn't tell, but I guess she had a few tricks up her sleeve. But maybe I deserve it. All the pain I caused, they call it karma.